Before we begin today, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and express the gratitude on the land for which we are gathering today. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to gather and work on this land. I'd like to extend a warm RBC welcome to all of you and share how pleased we are that you could join us today at the Toronto Region Board of Trade Franchising 101, your guide to entrepreneurial success in Canada. The entrepreneurial spirit is stronger than ever, and business ownership is increasingly being seen as a viable career path. Oh, now I'm doing something here. Try that. For many Canadians. Over the past 5 years, the number of franchise brands has grown 23%, with Canadian franchises contributing $100 billion per year to the Canadian economy. At RBC, we know that the entrepreneurial and small business owner spirit is a unique journey. So, we also know that there's more to running a business than just finances. Because of this, RBC leverages strategic partnerships and invests in innovative solutions we can truly deliver that value beyond traditional banking and support and provide business owners with that really enhanced support along the way. As an organization deeply rooted in supporting and empowering small business, we are making it easier for Canadian entrepreneurs to thrive in a competitive marketplace through trusted advice and a range of products and services. At RBC, our purpose is to help clients thrive and communities prosper, and we achieve this through our client-first approach. This workshop, tailored especially for you, is just a manifestation of this. The session today will offer you practical insights into the world of financing and franchising and owning a business within a proven framework. You'll have the opportunity to hear from our franchising experts. First of all, from RBC, we have Paul De Silva, National Vice President of Franchise and Retail Markets. Do a little wave. Paul and I have been working together for 20 years. Won't go into those stories. We have Sandra Giannini, Manager Business Markets for the Vaughan region. We have Sherry McNeil, President and CEO of the Franchise Association. We have Jordan Mowbray, Manager Business Markets for the Toronto North region at RBC. We have Gary Provenot, President and author of The Unstoppable Franchise at FranNet. So we just actually talked to someone who has your book, Gary. Just FYI, I was telling you about that. And of course, myself, Eric Turter. So thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our Manager Business Markets for Toronto North, Jordan Mowbray. And as mentioned, Jordan is the Manager Business Markets and the Chair for the Young Professionals Association at the Toronto Board of Trade. And he will also be moderating today's panel. So Jordan, come on up. Enjoy, everyone.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, I also don't think we need this, but we'll give it a go. Thank you so much, everybody. So really exciting panel today with 4 experts in the franchising space. So honestly, whether you're brand new to franchising or already an existing franchise owner, you'll learn a lot of valuable insights will be shared today. So the order of operations today, we're going to go through a bit of a roundtable, kind of ask these experts some questions about franchising. Then afterwards, we'll do a Q&A. So if anybody has any questions from the group, you're more than welcome to ask. We also have some questions that were shared with us beforehand. And then afterwards, we'll get back into networking. So maybe I'll kick us off with Sherry. Sherry, hello. So as the president and the CEO of the Canadian Franchise Association, maybe tell us a little bit about franchising and then also a little bit the CFA as well, and also the presence that you guys have in Ontario and Canada.
Okay, there's a lot of questions
Lots of
there,
questions.
all wrapped into one. So franchising in this country is the 13th largest industry, so we're bigger than forestry, bigger than mining. So Eric mentioned contributed $100 billion to the GDP. Those were last year's numbers. Sorry, Eric. We are anticipating that it will be $120 billion to Canadian GDP this year, which is an increase of 20% over the last 12 months, which is a testament to the franchise business model and its ability to grow during a pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. Franchising employs approximately 1.9 million Canadians. Directly and indirectly, 1 in 10 people across the country are some way associated with employment with franchising, which is pretty amazing when you stop and think about it. So that would include our RBC friends who work in the franchise portfolio because their work is associated with franchising. Interestingly, in Ontario, it's actually the largest concentration provincially of franchising in this country. So it, for instance, employs almost 1 million people in Ontario directly, and 32,000 franchise locations, and contributes almost $60 billion to the Ontario GDP. Did you want me to continue? Because I can talk about franchising all day long.
Keep going. You're doing great. Keep going. And I have another question for you after.
So what do we do, the CFA? Who are we? Well, we are the national not-for-profit organization that represents franchising in this country. So in our strategic plan, we have 4 strategic pillars. Who can tell me what they are? Anybody? Anybody? Gentleman there in the back. What's a strategic pillar?
The first one is community.
Right. Community would be number 1. And sorry, just so you know, that's a plant. He works for the CFA. Just trying to make it a little bit more interactive so it doesn't get too much like just people talking. So number 1 strategic priority is community, which is membership acquisition, membership retention, fostering that sense of community amongst our members so they can all network and learn from each other. What's the second strategic pillar?
Is it education?
It happens to be education. Look at that. Education, we provide education to the general public on franchising as well as our members and non-members. What's number 3?
Oh, I believe it's advocacy.
It is advocacy. So that's also a plant, just so you know. He works for the CFA, and he's actually our government relations person. So it's good that he answered that question. So advocacy, we lobby the government each and every day on franchising. So trying to protect the franchise business model in this country, helping franchising grow, and helping small business owners, which are franchisees. And what's the last one? Brand awareness. We help brands who are members, either franchisors or supplier members, grow their brands across this country. I'm going to stop there because we only have an hour.
No, perfect. Thanks for that. So actually wanted to elaborate a little bit as well on franchisor and franchisee. So would you mind kind of explaining that a little bit for some people that might not know?
Sure. So it's a term we use a lot in the franchise industry. We internally call it Z and ZOR. So the franchisor, the ZOR, is the head office, the parent company. The franchisee is the individual small business owner who lives and works in the community in which they serve.
Perfect. So maybe kind of adding on to that as well. So if I, just hypothetical, if I were interested in becoming a franchise owner, what would you say would be the most important step?
Ooh, good question. So Gary's an expert in this area, but just high level, I would say 1, go to the CFA website, www.canadianfranchiseassociation.com or cfa.com. There's a whole lot of information for the public on that website. There's also, we have a website called Look for a Franchise that you can type in keyword search like restaurant or your investment range. The most important part is doing your homework or doing your due diligence, because it's very, very important to have a match with yourself, your core values, with the brand that you're going to spend a lot of time with over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Perfect. So, and it's great that you actually brought up Gary, because he was actually my next question. So just a perfect segue over. So obviously, Gary, we talked a little bit about what you do. FranNet, for some people that might not know, it's kind of one of the premier franchise consultancies and matchmaking services in Canada. So obviously franchising, Gary, isn't a one-size-fits-all. We all know that. So maybe talk a little bit about what you do and how you kind of bring clients along that journey.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think when you look at franchising, I look at it first as a time compression strategy. It's compared to starting a business from scratch. You're getting the benefits of the franchise system to accelerate your learning. Year 1 is a kind of a learning year 2 is a growth year, so it compresses that. Then once you've got to competency, it accelerates that. But the key element is making sure you're in the right business. What a lot of people do is they go out online or they go to the franchise shows and they're looking for, I'll know it when I see it. Ah, that's the one. Kind of like you walk into a house and you know when it's the right house, right? Doesn't happen in franchise ownership, or rarely does, in part because the companies that show up most frequently are the ones who advertise the most. There's over 1,000 franchises in Canada, 60 different industries, so there's a lot of different options. So instead of trying to go out, I'll know it when I see it, start with yourself. What are your goals? What are your criteria? And it really, it's think back to when you were looking for your life partner. Did you not have a real important file specification that they must have this and it would be nice to have that? Or think about the vehicle that you drive. Did you not have criteria about payload, comfort, utility, efficiency, all those different elements? The same thing is, before you start looking out there at what the options are, figure out what you want. What are your skills? What are your goals? What are your outcomes that you want to achieve through business ownership? And just as importantly, what are your skill gaps? Because the franchisor is going to be maximizing your skill strengths, and they're going to be bridging the skill gaps. But if the business doesn't align to what you're good at, what you love to do, and I'm not talking about the product or service. It's important to believe in the product or service. You got to love the work as a franchisee to put that product or service in the customer's hands. That's the most important thing that when you're looking at a franchise. And just as over 1,000 different franchises, I'll give one more level of perspective. There's really 3 core models of franchise structure as an owner model. Owner-operator, for the life of the franchise, your business, you are the core driver of that business. You are always going to be involved. Even if you have a small team, the business is reliant on you. There are several business models like that. The executive owner is more for somebody who wants to, they're looking for a larger scale. They might look like an owner-operator for year 1 or 2 that are growing the business, getting it going, but building the team at the same time. Then the team takes over and they escalate. Now they're going to focus on growth and they're going to focus on scale. This might be multi-unit opportunity, one of the journeys of the franchise ownership. A third is semi-absentee, where it's kind of, it's manager-run businesses. You keep your corporate job, you invest in a business or franchise where you hire an experienced manager to run the day-to-day. You're managing that manager in the back office for 15 to 20 hours a week. So those are the 3 elemental models. We'll stop there.
Thanks for sharing that. To kind of know the difference between the 3 of them. So if I were to be starting off as a franchise, what would I expect?
Boy, it's the unexpected. Look, the reality is, running a business, I don't care what business it is hard work. When you're launching a franchise, you will work harder than you ever have at anything you've done in corporate. It'll take longer than you expect. It'll take more money than you expected. So plan for that and anticipate. Now, it's not a long grind. It's like year 1 is a sacrifice year. By the end of year 1, you should be in flow. By year 2, you really got things going. But it's just anticipate that. I see so many people, we've worked with over 2,000 people, folks. I've seen so many people are surprised by, wow, it took longer. Wow, I budgeted this, it took that. So understand that component.
May I?
Yeah.
So I used to work on the franchisor side, so I worked for a variety of brands before I came to the not-for-profit side. So I cannot impress upon you, do your homework, because I spent a lot of time from a brand perspective qualifying potential franchisees to make sure they were the right fit. Did they have the right amount of money? Did they understand what it meant to run a business? Were they going to be dedicated to the brand? Did they love it? Because if you don't love it, you're going to be trying to get out. You're going to be calling Gary for the next opportunity, right? So the average Canadian interacts with 3 to 5 franchise businesses each and every day. Each and every day. Now you think about that for a second. So you probably already have favorite brands that are franchises that you're interacting with. But you might love the brand and the product, but you might not be a good franchisee for that brand. And that's what Gary's trying to say in a nice, really nice way. But having been on the franchisor side, you want to make sure you're making that right decision, because it's easier to get divorced than it is to leave a franchise system.
And there are, so food and retail is roughly 42-43% of the industry. There's a lot more that's not food and retail that's not as visible. But let's come back to the franchise journey. I think the journey, it starts when you're just starting to look and what are my options and what's good for me or not. So the business model, creating the business model is 2 to 3 hours of consulting, personality assessments, really getting a sense of that. Then getting franchise, what I'll call franchise targets. Here's 2 or 3 or 4 options. I recommend looking at multiple options at the same time, folks, because as you're learning from business A, oh, they're really good at marketing, and look at what they can do to help me build my staff. And oh, what about fulfillment? You know, so they talk about certain brands are better at some things than others. So as you learn from one, it's going to teach you to get better questions and better answers, deeper and deeper. And as you go through that, it's always comparing against what your goals and your criteria are. How well does it fit? How well can I execute that business model? How much money can I make? That's the wrong question. It's one everybody wants to know, but it's the wrong question. How much money, what is my goal, and what is the work I have to do to achieve at that level? That's the question that you have to answer. And most people still miss that. So it's doing the research, getting to the point of narrowing it down, talking to the franchisor, learning the business model from the franchisors, then talking to the existing franchisees. How well is it working? Franchisors tell, great story. Franchisees say, yeah, they're really good here, but, and you know what? Some franchisees will say they're really good here and they're not here. Another franchise in the same system, they're really good here. It's how each one of you will execute the business differently because of your skills, your personality, your drive, the things that compete for your attention. So it starts with getting through and making sure the right business, you can say, this is the right business for me, here's how I'm going to execute, and here's why it's right for me. Then you launch. But just before you launch, you get involved with the bank to do the financing, and then the journey starts from the owner going forward.
Yeah, and if I could add to that is, you know, it's amazing how many times I get a franchisee that's coming on, hey, we're just opening, and I'm going to open 3 more. Well, the first year, really get good at what you're doing. Become extremely operationally perfect at what you're doing. From there, the rest is easy. But it's amazing how they come in and go, oh yeah, we're going to open 3, and the next one's going to be in 6 months. You're dealing with the opening rather than dealing with the operations. Like, you've got to get the operations down pat. You've got to feel comfortable. You've got to be able to understand how the business runs before you start looking at the next operation. And it's amazing, especially now with multi-unit ownership. They're all talking about 5 in 5 years. And we go through the exercise all the time. Like, what does that look like? And to your point about the journey is, we'll actually take year 1 all the way through 5, and what does that look like? And sometimes there's gaps and holes in it that haven't been fleshed out. And that's why if I get a phone call going, what brand should I get into? Gary, get to know Gary Prennable. He's the best guy to know.
Just on that, I had 2 clients in 1 year with the same brand. One talked to the other into it, bought unit 1, got it up and running, but not to break even, and took the money they had allocated for unit 2 and to launch the first one, pardon me, and bought unit 2 and got it up and running. Neither were break even. Both franchisees failed and lost nearly $1 million each. So get the first one cash flow positive consistently. Franchisor will work with you to delay the opening if you've got a multi-unit schedule, but open and grow when you're ready, not before.
So before we jump over to the colleagues at the Royal over there, one more question for Sherry. So we're talking obviously a lot about individuals that are brand new to franchising, but another way to franchise is if you're an existing business owner. So would you mind expanding a little bit on that, on people that are existing business owners that want to scale and maybe want to look at franchising as an option?
So we do help people who are business owners who want to be the next McDonald's, or they want to be the next super franchisor. We have a program called How to Franchise Your Business. So it's done virtually. We do it approximately 6 times a year. So I encourage you to sign up for that if you are a small business owner who you have 2 units or you have 3 units. You want to figure out if your product is the unit economics work, it's scalable. And what do I mean by scalable? It means it's replicable, it's easily trainable, and you can take it to other regions of the country because you have a product or service that the majority of the population will enjoy.
I would add to it, you're going to be a franchisor, you better love coaching and mentoring, because that's your primary role. Your primary role is to ensure and assist with the successful unit economics and operational performance of your franchisees.
So right now, if you're running a business where, you know, say you're making, give me a number, $100,000 net to the bottom line. So if you're going to become a franchise owner, franchisor, and you want franchisees to buy your concept and build the same thing, remember they're going to be remitting a royalty, an advertising, maybe a lease admin fee, maybe a distribution fee, whatever you decide fees you're going to charge the franchisee, that changes the unit economics for the franchisee from the units that you have run. And so that's why that it needs to be scalable, and you need to run your financial models to make sure the franchisee can make money, because you will only be successful as the franchisor if your franchisees are profitable and run great businesses.
And the biggest transition that new franchisors have to make is their customers are no longer their customers. Their previous customers are now their franchisees' customers. Their customers are now their franchisees. That's hard to let go of that, especially if you're a type A control person.
No,
that doesn't happen.
So maybe let's pass it over to Paul. So Paul, maybe talk to us a little bit about RBC's involvement and presence in the franchise space.
So we've been involved for a long, long time. When McDonald's first opened their location, that's kind of when franchising started for us, and we started to get involved in there. And Sherry and I were talking about, we slowly got involved with the community, and we talked about some of the other brands that we slowly put programs together. And so programs are just basically guidelines for how to lend to that brand based on the business model that's presented. So today we've got over 20,000 clients, unique businesses. So I can't tell you how many units we have because we don't capture that information. You talked about 1,000 brands. We've got 1,700 different brands that we track. So I know, and for staff who've gotten emails from me, we track every single brand, we track every single customer, we get involved in their credit structure and all that stuff. We get involved in how they're growing. The journey is very important for me because I need to know where they're going and how they're going, and make sure that we follow along that journey and prepare them for the future. In terms of the relationship and the presence, Sherry says, Paul, can you join the supplier committee and be part of the CFA? And I always say yes. It's that community and all the franchisors and over the years that you get to develop relationships. Like, it's a big community, but yet it's still a small community. Like, I've known you for a long time.
90s.
Yes, it's the 90s. It's a very tight-knit community. It's a lot of fun. We all try to help each other. We are trying to help franchisees be successful. And as Sherry said, a happy franchisee makes a great system because they're making money, they're enjoying what they're doing, they want to grow, they want to bring in more customers, they're focused on bringing traffic through the door. So being involved with those franchisees is incredible. I love going out and talk to franchisors, franchisees. Franchisees are the coolest ones because they're green, like they have no idea what they're talking, and watching that journey from them is incredibly important. The big piece, getting involved in franchising, investing into is a big commitment. Like Sherry said, it's easier to get divorced than to get out of the system. And I've seen franchisees try to get out. I've seen franchisees trying to get in. I've seen franchisees get in trouble, and I've seen franchisees be successful. It's important that we set them up for success. And that's kind of why having presence in this marketplace is important for us.
Before we continue, I think Robert told me at 12:55 there'll be an alert from the Ontario. I think all of our phones will be beeping in about 7 minutes, so get ready for that. On Paul's note, I just wanted to expand a bit further, and then maybe I'll pass over to Sandro after. But we talked high level, obviously, about RBC support of franchising, kind of holistic, but like, how does RBC support franchisors and franchise owners, not only at the beginning of the banking process, but also throughout their entire journey? So maybe, Paul, if you don't mind, talking kind of higher level, then we'll pass it over to Sandro after, who manages a team of bankers on the field.
I'm going to keep it high level. There are three kind of groups that I support. Franchisors, as again, Sherry and I were talking, during COVID, right when COVID hit, if you go back to May or June of 2020, and huge amounts of uncertainty. I must have spoken for hours on the phone with franchisors relative to what's going on, what's going to happen. And even to this day, now I'm getting a ton of questions as what's going to happen with SEBA. I got Derek bugging me on a daily basis. What are we doing with SEBA? So it's that engagement with franchisors at the high level, because they'll take that information and cascade it down to their franchisees, because it's just basically having some kind of relationship. I didn't tell you these guys this, but recently we have some really strong franchisors, and I received an email from a franchisor that wanted us to be to help drive their growth and the renovations that we're going through. And normally the banks, there's 6 banks in Canada. Normally we're out really trying to get in front of the franchisors to help them with their growth. To have a franchisor reach out to us as the only bank that they're going to deal with to help them with this problem, that is cool. That doesn't happen, and it only develops as a result of the relationship. And you want to develop that relationship with your account manager, either franchisor or franchisees. Franchisees, it's a slightly different one. For that, I really want to know is what the journey looks like. You're buying it today, but what is that 10-year, 15-year horizon? What are you trying to do with this thing? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to be the next McDonald's? Are you trying to be, do you want to have 100 years? There's a franchise system in the States called Flynn Group. Flynn Group has, I think, 2,200 locations over a ton of different brands. That is coming into Canada slowly, but that is such a cool, think about that, buying your first one 30 years ago and you're just continuing to grow. Had a franchisee I got involved with them in 2016, they had 4 locations. We're now having a chat, we're having lunch on Thursday, which is the best part of being in franchising because you do a lot of lunches. So Thursday we're having a lunch and we're gonna help them buy their 30th to 35. That's from 2016 on. And again, he really focused on operations, the rest took care of himself. The other the question that I get a lot of, the third one is, hey, I'm thinking of franchising my business. So I get a ton of questions. I get it from VPs, I get it from the account managers, I get it from clients. How do I franchise my business? There's so many aspects of it, and Sherry talked about it. That's a day-long presentation, how to franchise your business. There's so many things to consider. That's just a teardrop of what you need to consider if you're gonna franchise your business. The only thing I would say on that is get a really good lawyer.
Franchise lawyer.
A franchise lawyer.
If I could add to the franchise journey, what Paul was talking about scale, it's related to, it's a different variation of an exit strategy. You never go into business without having an idea of what your exit strategy is. One is buy, build, and sell. I'm gonna run it for 10 years, I'm gonna sell it, have a cash event at the side, and fund my retirement. Lifetime capital gains exemption, there's a bunch of things that make that a good strategy. Another is buy, build, and get my kids involved or family and create a legacy, and buy, build, and hold and keep for the family. What Paul was referring to is buy, build, and hold, but scale. So you want to make sure whatever business you're looking at, folks, has the scalability. It's not just that the market's available now, is it a single brand and everything around you is sold? Probably not much scale there. If it's a parent that's got multiple brands and you're starting with one, but you can scale with other brands, and it's a more viable strategy. But as you scale, recognize the old thing called the Peter Principle, where you rise to the level of your own incompetence. There's a certain level that you scale, you have to add leadership infrastructure. You have to add other layers to be able to take it to that next level. Private equity, all the different elements. There's more money in coming from private equity now than ever before in franchising, and that's driving a lot of growth. And I've even read reports on franchises that don't have private equity are going to have more trouble competing. So because there's just more money involved in this. There's a lot of things that when you're looking at where do I start, but where do I want to get to? That's got to be part of defining your why and what now, so you can make sure your midterm, long-term goals can be achieved.
And to add to that is, when we're looking at large we're not really focused on the money because the money's there. It's really on the management. What infrastructure do you have in place to help you grow? We've turned down transactions that were 5 units, had plenty of cash flow, but they were keeping their full-time job. They were gonna hire managers as they grow. And I'm thinking, you need to be developing the managers almost a year out. You need to be developing before you make the decision to buy. You can't walk and talk at the same time. You have to be further out. So that's kind of the thing. Understand what that journey is like, and management is a big component for us.
To Sandra as well, similar question. So what is, your team of relationship managers, for example, do to support the entrepreneurial journey? Do we cut off his mic?
Hello. We're good? So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So nice to see some franchisors and franchisee clients that are here, some prospects, and a great team of advisors from the Royal Bank. Couple of things that were said. I want to pick up on Paul. Journey. We are part of your journey, and it will obviously have a financial component, but relationship is key. So as you venture into this, communicate early with your advisor, preferably a banking advisor, relationship manager who understands franchising, not just someone that's at a branch. We are here with you, for you. We care about you. We don't care about your loan. We'll help you get the financing you need. We want to help you create wealth, do what's right for you, and make sure that you're successful, because we all win when everyone is successful on that. So we'll keep talking. We're in the loop. We help you in different ways than just financing and giving you loans. In fact, that's probably the least thing that we do, although we're very good at it. But we're here to offer a lot of advice along the way, from everyday banking to help you with your day-to-day, help you move money, how it comes in, how it goes out, what you do with the money you keep. Right? We'll also help you when you're in the building stage we've gotten involved with landlords, we've gotten involved with permits from the city, rents, supplier issues, equipment delays. So we're here to work for you and with you to make you, to help you successful and make, whatever dream that is you have. In terms of which franchising today that you'd like to get involved with. So, and we're excited to do it with you.
Thanks, Andrew. So then also, if you are new to franchising, are there any tips that you'd say for entrepreneurs that need to prepare themselves for if they're interested in purchasing and financing a franchise?
Again, communicate early. Sit down first with your circle of trust, whoever you go to. There's our, there it is. Yeah, Gary, we don't know what you're talking about. I would start by saying you're not in this alone, so talk to whoever's important to you in making decisions, your family, your friends, professionals, accountants, lawyers, spiritual leaders, whoever is in your circle of trust. Have the conversation. Get the support you need, because as we heard today, the hours are long. The gratitude can be not as much in the beginning, but the reward can be outstanding in the long run on that. So find out who is important to you. Communicate early with your advisor, your banker, so that everyone knows what you are trying to achieve on that. So
I don't think I'm violating any confidentiality agreement by giving real life examples. So to Paul and Sandro's point, I call it building your goodwill bank account. So as you embark upon either the journey to be a franchisor or the journey to be a franchisee, you must choose wisely your advisors. You will need a franchise lawyer. Please do not use the person that helped you buy your house or your condo or wrote your will. It's a specialized aspect of the law, and franchising is very regulated in certain provinces in this country, including Ontario. So it's very, very important that you follow the law, especially as a franchisor. As a franchisee, it does allow you to rescind your franchise business if the franchisor hasn't met their minimum requirements. As you build that goodwill bank account, you need to build trust with your advisor. So when I was on the franchisor side, Paul and I worked together on a variety of projects, and the brand I was with at the time was considered an A client of the Royal Bank. We spent a lot of time as a brand developing that relationship. And I can tell you, when franchisees got into trouble, they're getting divorced. The restaurant's halfway under construction. Guess what? They have a loan with the Royal Bank. Who did I call after the franchisee called me? Who did I call? This guy right here. and said, we have a problem. The franchisee that was approved, where they were approved as a married couple with joint assets, they are now getting divorced. And so we have a bit of an issue because some of the loans have already been released. They've been released based on their joint assets and joint liabilities. However, one of them now does not want to be involved with the business. I got on a plane and flew to Alberta the very next day, and Paul and I were on the phone, and Royal Bank helped us create a solution to continue the construction of that restaurant, because the trades are on site, general contractor needed to be paid. And so the brand stepped up to provide some bridge financing while the bank had to go through their appropriate risk assessment, and then they actually worked with the franchise partners to help one of those spouses remove from the business. So that just is an example how that you have to build that goodwill bank account with your trusted advisors, lawyer or banker. So Paul and I probably have 100 of those stories where the Royal Bank actually stepped up and did a lot of work with those franchisees for that brand. We renovated 196 restaurants in 36 months, and the Royal Bank was our preferred lender of choice at the time, to the point where I convinced Paul that his advisors should call the franchisees and directly and supply them with financing.
Well, it's funny. It's that relationship, that communication, and trying to find a solution and all that stuff that leads us to a franchisor saying, we want you to be the lead bank on this. Because you develop that trust, and it goes back to the relationship. If you screw that relationship up, it'll take a long time for you to recover. And there are franchisors. It's funny, I go to a trade show, and I always carry a book, but I always carry it, because there's always an RBC here. So I always carry the book up here, depending on what brand I'm seeing, because there's a couple of those brands that really don't like me, because the lack of communication, and we take a more rigid approach. But when you have a franchisor that's willing to work with us, and we're willing to work with them, and we could try to find a solution at the end, everybody benefits from it. There's no reason for you to go it alone. Like, you do have partners, as Sandra talked about. Have an open communication. You're going to tell something. You're going to tell your banker things that you might not tell your best friend, or sometimes not even your spouse. So that relationship, that ability to create a trust that we could find the solution, or if we can, great. If we can't, we've also had enough trust that we can't find the solution. This is the outcome of it, and that communication is so important.
But it goes further than just the bank. It's also all of your advisors, and franchising is all about relationships. It's about the relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee. Franchisors provide support to franchisees to help them be more successful. Franchisees work their businesses to try to drive their own personal profitability. The more successful they are, the more successful the franchisor is. So it's a symbiotic relationship of mutual success, and it's all about that relationship and building that goodwill bank account. It's building the goodwill bank account with your consultants, like Gary, who's trying to help you find the best business suited for you. It's building the relationship with your banker, and it's all, franchising really is just about relationships.
I'm going to build on that on the relationship side. There is one of the most critical relationships in your life with the franchisee, and that's with the franchisor or the field development coach, the person who's directly responsible for helping you learn and grow. Unfortunately, and I did a lot of research for my book, the interdependence driver is what the biggest surprise is. Top performing franchisees have very strong relationships, not with just the franchisor and the field coach. They're actually part of the strategic discussions, but they also have great relationships with other franchisees. You will get more from your pure franchisees from support and insights if you manage that goodwill bank account well. Think of it as, and likewise, when you're starting your own business, you've got to create that goodwill bank account, ladies and gentlemen, in your own community. This is not a build a brand and the customers will come. I go so far, and this sometimes surprises people, the franchisor is never responsible to bring you customers. Like, what? That's why I'm buying a franchise. No, you're buying a franchise because this franchisor has a system and process that has built that brand. You have to execute that model to deliver that brand promise. That's what's going to get the customers coming back. They'll come 2 or 3 times for the brand. But if they don't have that good experience, they're going to not come back, and they're probably going to burn you on social media on the way out. So that goodwill bank account is on so many layers.
So that's great dialogue, guys. Maybe before we jump into the Q&A portion of of today, maybe one last question for Paul and for Sandro. Are there any key franchising trends and considerations that we're seeing, especially obviously related to the current economic climate?
So we talked about multi-unit operators. That is growing quite a bit, and we've already spent a lot of time on that one. One of the trends that I like, and it's kind of fun getting involved, is emerging brands like ethnic foods. You're seeing all these unique experiences that are emerging for established franchisors and emerging franchisors. It's important to create a unique experience that brings those customers back over and over again. So that's why when you're thinking about buying a franchise, there's also going to be a clause in there is when your refresh is. And you want to make sure that you plan out for that refresh. That is so important. That is when you have the opportunity to redo your restaurants or your franchise business, whether it's a retail or anything else, to create the opportunity for that business, that consumer to come back. So that's an important trend. Down cycles, Sherry talked a bit about it. Down cycles, franchising always takes off on down cycles. So it's interesting to start looking at it, especially now as we go through this. The last trend, and it's something that's unique in this cycle, is both an inflationary, well, you got to go back a few years ago, both inflationary and high interest rate, or rapid rise in inflation rate, which is unique. So the one thing that's coming out of this is the ability to pivot and what's happening with your business to react to those trends that are happening. I still have a lot of franchisees that 2019 was great, 2020 with COVID was good, 2021 was just awesome, and now as things are starting to come back, they're not changing behaviors. And all of a sudden, a divorce happens, and the whole thing is just, so you have to change with what's happening in the marketplace. So if labor's tightening up, focus on that reality. If interest rates are going up, focus on that reality. Inflation right now is an incredible reality. Focus on that reality. What can you do to change? So those are the things that I sort of keep me up, especially inflation and interest rates just keep me up at night.
Other cool trends that we're seeing is women in franchising just exploding. It's fantastic. Newcomer, new Canadian immigrant franchising. A lot of them are coming with assets, or they can't find a job, so they'll do what they do really well. We're excited about that. We're seeing a growth in non-food quick service franchising. So a lot of the other services, I'm going to pick on Wax On. I'm going to spotlight Wax On, but you've got everything from storage is hot right now, trending. We're living in smaller places, I guess. We have to put our junk somewhere. But you're seeing a lot of non-food, so that's a good one there. And just, I think, digitalization. Even if you're running a franchise now, the trend we're seeing is how do you pivot? How do you adapt? How do you think forward on that? So everyone's adapting. Obviously, the trend is how do I do it with less staff because I can't find anybody? And so that's an issue right now. That's a trend, maybe not a positive one, but getting people to work for you, for your business. That's another interesting one. I guess, and any other trends?
The pets are, people will spend more on the pets than they will on their kids. Hyper competitive for real estate. So if it's just product based, you got to be careful because it's can be offshored or Amazoned out. The combination of product and service. My clients are interested in, most of my clients come out of corporate, so they're not really looking for food. They're looking for sustainable businesses, so need-based or high-demand, want-based businesses versus impulse purchase businesses. So anything in the home improvement, it's a planned purchase. It's an old growth industry, but it's still very popular. It's one of the most stable categories. There's a lot of home beautification. The beauty or wellness services, there's a whole range of those. So you think about what do people really need, or what do they pay for, even if the dollars are tight, that they'll spend on that before anything else. What do you think the number one home requested service is in Canada and has been for 40 years and still is today? Residential cleaning. Not a glamorous business, but a glamorous business model. It's just an example. Things that people don't think about. 90% of my clients have bought businesses they would have never seen themselves in or picked from a list. Because what they think is a great business, realize that there's other things better for them that utilize their skills better.
Actually, another trend that I noticed more on the structure side is I'm seeing, normally we see a client will have multiple locations, but what we're seeing now is family organizations. So we'll see extended families, so we'll have four parents. So their kids own 10 here, their kids own 10 there, their kids own 10. And we're trying to figure out how do we ring-arc, because it's not part of one organization. It's like a family organization. So we're still trying to get our heads around that one. But it's amazing how many have popped up in the last couple of years.
Yeah, but they got to start with I come from family businesses. Having family agree on stuff, or not always easy. Make sure you have a really good shareholders agreement that defines roles and accountability. What was that advice you were saying?
Yes,
the guidance?
very, very
Really good lawyer.
All right, did you have your hand up, Paul, or all good? Okay. All right, guys, so maybe over to the Q&A portion. We had some questions shared with us from the audience beforehand, so we'll jump into those. But if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to put your hand up and we can help. Okay. Question in the back.
I'm curious to see maybe what's the youngest age of someone who starts a particular business and then wants to turn it into a franchise, and how can we help those young people? So let me give some background. We've just launched, and I'll share, an entrepreneurship and financial literacy program within our office, and we've got young people who create service and products. But they create it almost as novelty and to see if they can do it. But we have an opportunity to extend that to have them having a complete full functioning business afterwards. They get international notoriety because they compete, and now we want to help them to bring that to a full-fledged business. How would we tap into, I think, Sherry is, yes? I think you're on this side of how do we now transition those young people outside of having guest speakers come into our office to share some of the knowledge about franchising. How do we start to prepare them both mentally and from a structural operations standpoint to be successful in jumping off into franchise?
So it's a great question, and that's amazing because I love young entrepreneurs. And so there is no minimum age for starting a small business. We do see, it's actually a trend that we saw really rise during COVID, is people started a side hustle or gig, and that then they turned into a business, which then they now are going on the franchise journey. So our How to Franchise Your Business seminars are more frequently attended this year than they have ever been in the past, due to people going on that franchise journey and deciding if franchising is right for them or not. To franchise your business is actually very expensive. Most of that expense, or a big portion of that expense, is the legal requirements to be legally compliant within this province. And it's called a franchise disclosure document, and that you have to codify all the different aspects of your business and disclose that to any franchisee who might be interested in becoming part of your brand. So there are several steps involved prior to that. So if a franchise lawyer was on this panel, they would say, step one, trademark. Register your trademarks. Register your proprietary items before you do anything else, because oftentimes they get to the disclosure phase, which might cost $100,000, for example. And they can't register the trademark for a brand that's been operating maybe for 12 months, 24 months, 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we can talk offline and we can figure out how to get some of your colleagues or the people that you're working with, how we can help them on their franchise journey. You're welcome.
I'm going to bring a different perspective.
Answer a bit that youngest person, 18-year-old in Vaughan, through Vaughan Business Enterprise Center, the summer work program, started grass cutting business and actually expanded it and took it to the next level. There's another 18-year-old started collecting vinyl records in their garage as a hobby, took it to the next level, got so successful, didn't want to go to school, wanted to take this full time. I can still hear the mother yelling at me like it was my fault. So there's a lot of great ideas, and it's optimistic out there, and people have some wonderful ideas. Things are happening out there. Yeah.
The first part, the age answer, I've had clients, two brothers, 18 and 20, bought an automotive, call it a, getting the cars looking nicer, so tinting and other things like that. The reality is they got to be funded. So bank and mom and dad in that case. Combination with, in that case it was RBC as well. And Futurepreneur program. Futurepreneur is a combination BDC up to $60,000, great program. So that's for them to be able to execute the franchise. What I see for most location-based or what I call strong, stable franchises, probably $50,000 of capital from the family somewhere is kind of the entry fee. 75 to 100 creates more options. And then it goes from there. But a lot of franchisors look at young people as saying, okay, it's great that you got the energy, but where is the stability or so they like to have parents or other family members involved. And that comes back to the family ownership trend, because the community aspect of family. If they want to grow a franchise, so they've got really good ideas and kind of where Sherry was going and wanting to grow a franchise, it's great. There are really good things that they can do, but they also have to understand that they live and survive on selling and supporting franchisees. So people who are buying franchises, they have to answer the question to those prospective franchisees, why should I have confidence in you? Why is your model, how are you going to help me? And if they're younger, it's going to be, they've got to be able to make sure they have good answers to that.
So the one thing that we've talked a lot about here is traditional models. So bricks and mortars businesses. So you have a street front location, you sell retail, you sell a product or a service like a restaurant or a dry cleaner, hair salon. There's a variety of other franchises out there. Many are home-based franchises, so there's no bricks and mortar costs. So for instance, we have a member to pillar to post. They're home inspectors. They have over 600 locations. They're our next door neighbor at the office. That's why I think of them all the time. But the cost to replicate that, to make it scalable to a franchisee, is much less than the scalability of a bricks and mortar business. The part we don't talk about much in Canada yet is called social franchising, but it is a global franchise model that is growing in popularity, which the cost to become a franchisor is much, much less, and it provides products and services to help people who need help. So for instance, slushies that have vitamins that are sold on carts into the impoverished neighborhoods of Brazil. There's a franchisor, they co-share with the franchisee to provide those products and services to the impoverished areas of Brazil. So I'm not going to get into that because we don't do it much here yet, but hopefully we will start to see more of that here, which the cost then for investment would be much, much lower.
If I could add to it, we've actually got I think it's in the Ottawa marketplace, where the franchisor and the franchisee are trying to figure out how to do this deal, right? They love this franchisee and they want to help this franchisee. I think we spent maybe 3 hours now on the phone trying to find a solution. And that's kind of where that particular transaction will get really creative. And we did get really creative. So there's flexibility in a lot of the programs that we have in place to help with that flexibility.
Sorry, Lou. Question over to here.
I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on, so there's a broad spectrum of franchisors that could be sort of very early on, again, starting their process of franchising their business versus the McDonald's and Tim Hortons of the world. So for prospective franchisees, if they're evaluating a newer franchisor that maybe doesn't have tons of locations to say, hey, this is a super successful system that we can, sort of plug and play into, how would the evaluation process maybe differ versus evaluating a more established brand?
There's a fast answer and a short answer for that, or a long answer. The short answer is the fewer franchisees you have, the harder it is going to be to get clarity around how well that franchisor performs, what the unit economics are like, and it requires a much bigger leap of faith. So that implies more risk. The longer answer, there's 4 stages of franchisor maturity. Micro emerging is 0 to 10 employees, or 10 franchisees, pardon me. So the franchisees are the alpha and beta tests at that age, because even if the franchisor has got units, they're learning how to be a franchisor. They're learning all those different elements, and they probably are a little light on leadership. They've a lot of divided roles. So whatever the models are, not might evolve, it will evolve. It will be different by the time it's 20 or 30 units. So some of the advantages, great opportunity if it's a good solution. You have early adopter getting in. You also have a good potential of being a voice and shaping the direction of that franchise. So you come up with a thought leadership team. Highest risk in the maturity scale. Next is micro emerging, which is, emerging. Micro emerging is 0 to 10, 11 to 75 units. Now you've got good 3 to 5 years of franchising. The more units they have, the more systematized it is. There's a lot of stability. You've got leadership that is developing and growing. You've got the franchise family that's growing. All the benefits. What you don't have is brand potency, because it takes probably 75 to 100 units to get to brand potency. Again, advantage, you get the systems, but you don't have the brand. And lots of location availability. Mainstream, which is where most people are thinking about when they think of franchising, there's the visible, there's one. So you got brand dominance, you got great leadership, you got great systems. There's not a lot of disadvantages except scalability. A lot of locations are gone, so it's harder to get the location. So you're looking for new growth areas, infill, things like that. And then the final is the mature systems, which are 200 plus the super brands, global brands, all the same benefits, a little bit more risk on location, lack of location, and sometimes a risk on stagnation, lack of innovation. We see some franchisors get stuck in their ways when we were talking about how nimble it's important for the market to be.
So if I add to that, if you don't mind.
No.
So it really depends on you as the individual. If you're more entrepreneurial, you might want to consider a smaller brand because you'll be a larger voice. If you go to a more mature brand, you're not going to be part of product innovation. They're not going to say, yes, go ahead and test your idea. They already have all the prep charts, all the operations manuals. They have their systems, their routines, et cetera. And their job as a large franchisor is to protect the investment of all the franchisees. So if you're off doing your own thing, they're going to remove you from the system. Smaller franchisor, to Gary's point, you have a larger voice and you can test products. You can be a trial center. You can be part of the pioneer and the growth of that brand. So we see that time and time again, and that's part of Gary's expertise is what's your personality like, and maybe you're better suited for small brand, mid-sized brand, or large and iconic brand.
And just to finish off on that, my rules for my clients is when you're talking to existing franchisees as part of your assessment, it's a minimum of 6 to 8, ideally 10, 1/3 top, 1/3 middle, 1/3 unhappy franchisees. And franchisors are saying, here, talk to these people, right? They're our happy ones. Well, it's good that you're talking to them, but you want to understand what are people who aren't as happy, what are they, and is it the system, and they're not following the system, which is the vast majority of cases, or is it that the system isn't working? If the system's not working, you're going to hear a lot more of that across all the franchises.
And the systems, we tend to lend less. We tend to move down that spectrum. So we may do 50%, 60%. The reason why is you need cushion. So if an emerging brand suddenly something happens in their marketplace and that idea is not working, they have to have the ability to shift. If you're highly leveraged, and I can't admit, you can't believe how many times I see an emerging brand that wants to do 90% financing. That is a death sentence. You want that liquidity to keep you safe. Coming out of COVID or going into COVID, what really freaked me out, the biggest fear that we had is there enough liquidity in the marketplace? Franchising blew it out of the water in terms of the liquidity. They dumped tons of money into the marketplace. And it was one of the best performing segments because they had the liquidity. If you're going up to 90% and you have to go to 90%, give it a second look. Because if you have that kind of leverage, you cannot afford a mistake because your payment is due.
to that point, we'll work with you. Not how much you can borrow, but at what point are you comfortable? We want to make sure that you're going to meet all your obligations. You're going to have the lifestyle that you want. So often they'll come in and say, lend me as much as you can. Well, that's not the right answer. Let's go back and reverse engineer this. How much do you want to borrow? What's the line where you're comfortable and you're not worried about other obligations? We also want to make sure you have some room that if you wanted to perhaps entertain a second location in the near future, that there's some opportunity there. So you're not all in on the first location on that.
The questions we had was, what level of debt and stuff like that should you be borrowing? And actually, we work it backwards, right? We start working with, well, how much can the business support in terms of the level of debt? And there's a rule of thumb. So you want to have, most banks will have this, you want to have $1.25 available to service every dollar of debt. So it's $1.25 on every dollar. Ideally, if you're an emerging brand or a new franchisee, try to go to $1.50, $1.75, even $2 if you can, because that'll tell you how much debt you should be able to support, and then how much equity you need. So basically, we work backwards. Start with the business and how much cash flow it generates. We sensitize it. We try to get to those numbers. From there, we'll figure out how much you can borrow. That's why it's such a hard question to answer. Or how much can I make?
But something else we're seeing a lot more of now, the franchisor in the disclosure document, they've said that you cannot borrow more than this percentage because they want to protect you and their brand as well. So they want to make sure you're successful. So even though you qualify for more, and we've had a few instances where they could borrow more, they were prohibited by the agreement they signed. So.
Lending this franchisee that amount of money, I can't approve that because it's not to the brand standard. We need this franchisee to meet their ROI within our specific time frame, and lending them more money is not going to help set them up for success. So I'm sorry, I can't approve that.
Like, the franchisor is not moving forward because we've over leveraged. That does happen. But we have to make sure that it's set up for success. Like, that is the most important thing. It's 2 years minimum, a stable income, then we can start to get into really interesting things. But we also spend a lot of time with franchisors saying, this is what we're thinking about, this is what our experience is, how does it fit within your model? Because it's their business model. How does it fit within your model to help grow the network?
From an individual, so you're hearing from the bank portion, looking at it from the individual, from over 2,000 clients from age 18 to age 68, what we've seen over 22 years is that our average client is investing 25 to 40% of their net worth before debt. And the debt is most of it is Canada Small Business Finance Program, so there's a buffer there. Unless you've got a strong sales background, that hunter-farmer can make things happen. I've seen salespeople want to go 60%. They're more risk tolerant. So generally, we're seeing people conservative. 25% is pretty consistent.
But we do get creative. We look at sorry, Paul, because I'm on the street. I make it happen. We look at programs. Futurepreneur is a great one if they're under 39 years old. We look at match grant. Are there any grants available? Can the landlord kick something in? Can he or she kick something in? So we look at you. We look at we look at what's happening. We're not looking at the loan. We're looking at you. Okay? We're making this happen. Sitting right there pays me to say yes.
All right, guys. Great dialogue, great panel today. Thank you, everybody. I know we're at time, just to be respectful of all of your schedules. So first of all, a big thank you, Sherry, Gary, Paul, Sandro. So maybe everybody a round of applause for them. All right, so we also have some networking, I believe, until 2. I believe the panelists are going to be joining as well for that. So obviously, if there's some questions that you had that you weren't able to get answered today, you're more than welcome to bother them. Alternatively, you're welcome to reach out to me, the Toronto Regional Board of Trade members around the table. They can share my details. You can reach out. I can connect you with any of these fine individuals or their organizations. Finally, hope that you all enjoyed the presentation today. Hopeful that there was a lot of insights shared.
a series of videos. It's on my website, youre2ejourney.com. The number E, the letter 2, no, letter E, the number 2E, employee to entrepreneur, youre2ejourney.com. A series of 12 videos that walks you through all the different elements you need to look at, from starting a business from scratch, buying an existing business, buying a franchise, funding, a lot of different elements, just to help you understand what's there. So it's no cost, it's just there as a resource.
So also a big thank you to the Toronto Regional Board of Trade Group. Robert, thank you to your team for setting this up, so thank you for this. And on behalf of RBC, Toronto Regional Board of Trade, and all the speakers, it's been an absolute privilege, and looking forward to meeting many of you outside. So thank you.